So, Emily, when was the first time you heard that word?
I was 12 from memory, and I had picked up a Stephen King book for the bookshelves in our house.
Like you do.
Yeah, as you do. I mean, we weren't told what we could or couldn't read, and I was reading, I can't remember which book it was, and I came across this word. I remember going downstairs and asking my stepfather, who was working at his desk, I said, what does this mean? And he said, well, let me put it this way. If you say that word to your mother, she will slap you. And if you say it to your grandmother, she will fall over and die. Kia ora, hello, and welcome to this episode of Play Notes Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Duncan.
And I'm also your host, Alison Horsley.
And we're both dramaturgs, meaning we read a lot of plays.
We've likely read the plays you feel you should have, but didn't.
And that's where Play Notes comes in. And today we're going to talk about the first of two phenomenal monologues.
By women.
By women.
Yes. For women.
For women.
Well, to perform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the Vagina Monologues by Eve Ensler.
Yay! Now, vagina wasn't the word that we were talking about in the intro.
No.
But just
We'll
a
get to
warning,
that.
we will say the word vagina quite a few times in
And
this
the other word.
episode. And the other word.
Eventually.
In this episode as
Please
well.
don't fall over and die.
Yeah, that would be terrible.
It's a while since I was 12. Things have changed, but we also appreciate, for some people, cunt is polarizing.
Right.
Okay?
It is a polarizing.
Not for me any longer, but you know.
And it depends on what nation you're in, because frankly, you know, Aussies throw around the word cunt like it's
You'd be a good cunt.
Yeah. But in America, woo!
Right.
No, that's like the queen mother of the bad words.
Right.
That's worse than the F word.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that this was a phenomenal work is how it really addressed head on what was widely considered really taboo language.
Yeah, especially in the theater for people to be performing, and also in a title.
Yeah, the ladies of the twin set and pearls and
yeah, I'm
those
clutching my
pages,
pearls
yes.
as we speak, even thinking about the word vagina.
Yeah, and I told you how I had a really big missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Around the Vagina Monologues.
Yeah. So what
I
was
don't know how
that?
missed it was. So when I was at studying at the Lee Strasberg Theatre Institute in New York City, that's when the Vagina Monologues was first being performed by Eve Ensler.
Yeah.
And
so she started that in 96, right?
96. This
Yeah.
would be 96, 97.
Yeah.
And an older woman said to me, who was a professional actor, said, you should really try and go and see this play. Now, I was really quite skint, so if I was going to go to a play, I'd have to sort
Skint
of
means poor.
Yeah.
Okay.
I probably, like most people studying theatre or working in New York City, can actually afford to go to Broadway productions. Oh, the fucking irony.
Yeah.
But admittedly, the name of it did put me off. And I didn't know what to think of it. I thought, what is this, some like gynecological musical? I don't know.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend the other day, and this is like this is the
adult
other day, an adult
Yeah.
the other day who I said that we were covering the Vagina Monologues in this podcast, and they made a joke about like vaginas, you know, speaking. Which, you know, on one hand, kind of funny. On the other hand, this is a major work of you know, of theater history and literature.
Yeah.
You know, and it's still a bit of a joke because of the word vagina.
Yes.
Right? Like,
I mean,
it's fascinating.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Eve Ensler is she created this work after interviewing hundreds of women, like 200 women, about their sexuality and their vaginas and their relationships to their bodies and all of that, and then crafted it into a series of monologues. Now, they're not verbatim, right?
Yeah, we were talking earlier about, you know, how would you define this form of theatre? And that it is a form of docudrama, yeah. I also consider it a form of community theatre, and that she worked with various communities in order to
Oh, yeah.
pull the work together.
Oh, interesting. Because what I would interpret as community theater is the availability of the material for community groups to perform. But I think that means it's both. I mean, it's funny that it's like all of the above.
Yeah.
And that's rare, I think, for a play.
Yeah. And see, the short amount of training I've had in community theatre,
Yeah.
it was the approach of, and there are, as you say, there are various definitions. Same with docudrama. There's a whole range. There isn't one,
Yeah.
post in the ground that defines it. I tend to think of, yes, there are community theatre productions where you might think of like Amdram productions or such like.
Yeah.
But there's also those community theatre works, which the work itself and how the work is conceived and produced is very much community focused. It'll be telling the story of community, and how much professional practitioners are part of that. That can vary. Sometimes there can be one professional practitioner who goes and says, right, let's tell the story of, I don't know, the flour mill that was in the town. And you get everyone involved in the production to, be part of the production team, and they're the performers, but they also have this professional practitioner who's experienced in the form, sort of leading and mentoring them. Whereas I think of also this form of community, I think of it as community theatre, and that in Eve Ensler's approach of putting the work together, she did all these interviews with real people. However, she does also say this is not a verbatim work. Do you want to explain verbatim a little bit?
Yeah, well, so verbatim theater is theater that's taken literally verbatim from interviews and things like that, whereas in this case, Ensler has used some of her own language in tying the monologues, I guess, as internal glue within the monologues, right? Is the major thing I think of.
Yeah, and while most of the monologues, they seem to come from the voice of a specific character, but she has modified it from the person or people she's interviewed.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're like an amalgamation.
Yeah, so they're amalgamation of multiple people that she interviewed. So it's not, now I'm going to be Betty who talks about this one particular thing.
Betty from Wisconsin.
Yeah. So she creates a character that's representative of a couple of these real life people. Where something more like the Laramie Project or more of a docudrama or even verbatim theater is going to be much more true to actual language that has been spoken by someone.
And sometimes it's very exact, right down to the movements that perform. But anyway, that's a whole other kettle of fish.
It is.
And we kind of touched on it, but I think it gives people a bit of an idea about what, how she put this work together.
Yeah, and it does say a lot about this particular work that she talks about how in the earlier days of the performances of it, often they would do it at universities and stuff, and like the theater departments wouldn't be involved. It would be other groups of people doing it, and I'd read that in one place where she had talked about that, and then I had this memory, and I realized the same thing happened at my university, where like the theater department didn't do anything with the Vagina Monologues. It was like somebody else on campus who was producing it. So it's very much a community-led initiative is what I mean.
And this is another part of the ongoing phenomenon that is the Vagina Monologues. There's the V-Day movement.
Yeah, and what is that? What does the V-Day movement stand for?
V-Day.
V for
also,
not vendetta.
Yeah.
Or also, for vagina.
Yeah, but also violence.
Yep. So
it used to take place on Valentine's Day. It's a movement around, raising awareness of violence
against women specifically.
I directed a number of years ago now a V-Day reading of the Vagina Monologues from memory, because I've got my copy of the book. And the book reads, it's a bit like we were talking about in the last episode of End of the Golden Weather, the published book version of Vagina Monologues. It reads almost more like literature as opposed to a play script. Yeah,
it could be a novella, or a series of essays by one particular writer. It doesn't read like it's like a play script.
Yeah. But from memory, when we did the V-Day reading, and we, used a group of women here in this neighbourhood in Ōtepoti, Dunedin, the V-Day organisers send you the version of the script they want to use, like a PDF
So the
version.
monologues have changed over time, or they've evolved?
Some have been evolved, adapted. From memory, I don't think all the ones in the book were in here. Something we had discussed is, has the work dated? Is it still appropriate? And I'm aware that some have been updated. I haven't read them. So the original collection of monologues, for example, doesn't have any transgender voices.
Yeah.
And I gather that's been addressed.
Oh, yeah. There's been, I guess, a completely trans production of it, and I imagine more than just the one, but I know of at least one. Where they have, and so presumably the language has been addressed, and the interviews as well.
And a way that really sort of encapsulates what theatre is. It's a living document. Yeah. Even though plays do get published into books.
Yeah. But if you want the rights to perform it, I mean, then you usually, in order to get the rights to do that, you have to contact the publisher and get whatever the most recent script is, or have that conversation.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've noticed this, Alison, because often I'll get books, this is not an endorsement. They don't sponsor us, but you can if you like. For example, Nick Hearn Books is a publisher of plays.
We love you, Nick Hearn Books. If you did want to sponsor us, that would be fine.
Yeah, we're here for you. They, often when you purchase one of their plays, they publish them to tie in with a West End production.
Yeah, usually it's in conjunction with...
Yeah. And they'll often have a note, and I suppose not put digging around in it, but it will say, this was the most update version of the script as we went into production, and they'll note that, there may have been changes made to the script and the process of rehearsing the play.
Yeah, and that's part and parcel of working with a play that is by a living playwright.
Yep.
And that's the other thing that we haven't dealt with that yet in the podcast.
Oh, we're only just getting there.
It's alive.
We're past the dead white man.
Yay! That's right. Now we're on to the live white women.
Recognition for all they've done.
Yes, they did a whole lot. Yep. But yeah, Eve Ensler is still alive. She was born in 1953. Am I making this
I think 53 or 52 around 53. There. And Phoebe Waller-Bridge is who we're talking next. She's finished alive.
She's like 12. She's so young.
Yeah.
So that's why these plays are still living documents, because the playwright's still alive. As a playwright, I'm sure you can identify with this, that the play is never really done, quote unquote.
No.
Until you are.
No. Yeah. When she first produced the play, she performed it herself. And then another part of the phenomenon of Vagina Monologues was that all these celebrity performers often would come in. There were the multicast performances.
Whoopi Goldberg. Lily Tomlin. People coming in and doing this. Goldie Hawn.
Yeah. And I always think of them like benefit concert performances.
Yeah, well, and that has spun off into similar types of work to raise awareness around different subjects, right? Because there's the breast cancer one as well.
Right.
That I think there had been a production of here in Dunedin a while back. So it feels like a form that can hold a lot of different conversations where, you can have a cast and almost, especially with something like this, do we know how many monologues comprise a standard performance of this now? Because if it was hundreds of interviews that she did, she probably wrote a number of them. But of course there's a finite number of monologues in the published version and in your standard production script.
Right.
Yeah, so you could have a rotating cast come through, you can have people splitting a monologue, presumably, all kinds of stuff.
Some of the monologues are clearly written for multiple voices. Yeah.
And we should probably talk about what some of the different monologues are.
Yeah, because it's something that, jumps out at me, even though this is my playwright hat on, is even though they're distinct monologues, I still see an overall structure in how they're arranged. If we go almost back to, Aristotle's sort of
Arc.
form,
Yeah, I mean,
summarizing it, yeah.
Yeah, with the climax and stuff.
Yeah. But one thing I've noticed in particular is that the monologues I find even really quite difficult to read. Mm-hmm. The violent
Yeah, so
ones that
particularly...
deal with, female genital mutilation or war rape.
Yeah.
She's sort of put them towards the centre of the collection.
Yeah. So they range in topic from a monologue about, a woman who...
some of them are really joyful. Happy and funny.
Yeah, discovering their vagina for the first time, having sex with a woman for the first time, all these...
Doing ridiculous things.
Yeah, just covering birth. So there are monologues covering the range of experiences,
And the published version I have, it ends with the birth. Mm-hmm. Which is, it's joyous and miraculous and all that.
Yeah, so it's all the things that vaginas can do.
Yes.
And a lot of the things that they don't do or that people haven't done with them.
But then I was saying to you, I reread them the other morning, and I find it very difficult even to reread those violent ones. Mm-hmm. I was saying to you, they're almost more bearable in a performance setting because you're with a group of people.
Yeah.
And they're in no way gratuitous. That's not what I'm suggesting. But they are brutal.
Well, it's making me think a little bit about the Greek idea of the purge, of a purging of emotion in some ways, and that being a shared experience.
How do you address a taboo?
Yeah,
really?
yeah, and it's through that collective power of a group of people coming together for a shared experience. Mm-hmm. And maybe that is the point of it in some ways. I mean, and as you mentioned, those monologues, the ones that are tougher to read, particularly the ones that have more violence in them, are kind of in the middle. So they're couched between a more joyful but also sad monologue that kind of starts it, and then a birth one in the published version that ends it. And then in the middle, there's a monologue that addresses the word.
The word, you can't.
Ah, you said the word.
I said the word.
Ugh.
Sorry, North America.
She doesn't start with the cunt monologue.
No. And my understanding is that there have been performances where the whole audience is saying it together in unison. Let's break this taboo down. Let's own this.
Yeah, and it is about reclaiming that and breaking down the language to get to the heart of whatever cultural or societal misogyny there is.
How word is weaponized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how the words are weaponized, and then that ties in with the V-Day thing as well. That, literally violence against women, that it's a physical violence as well as the words. So what else do we want to talk about with this play?
Well, I think we've covered a lot of it, and I just want to come back to before we end, because we haven't sort of touched on this with the other pieces. We talk about, the power of attending a performance of this work, and also recognise that might not be possible for everyone.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you can find performances of it.
There are a lot on YouTube.
Recommend. Okay.
Yeah, of Eve Ensler doing it. So there are a lot of sections of the monologues of her doing it, and it gives you a great sense of the range of characters that can be portrayed. Mm-hmm. And you also get, it's cool because you get Eve Ensler as a performer is a very particular look. Mm-hmm. She has her little haircut.
She's got her aesthetic.
Yeah, there's an aesthetic, and it gives you a sense, I think, of that of I guess that organizing principle behind the monologues, that there is a singular voice behind it, and yet it's these different stories. Yeah. And so I think watching her do it gives you a sense of the original creation of the show. But yeah, I watched quite a few of them online because I never got a chance to see her actually do it. But yeah, definitely access it. And then when live theater is happening, and people do it, then do go see it.
And read it.
Yeah, and read it.
Do read it.
I mean, because for me, one of my favorite, we always try to end with a favorite thing about the shows. But yeah, I love that this play gives so many women in particular just permission to use the word. And it's still such a weird taboo. Even just the word vagina, which is a physiological word. It's not even profanity or anything. And yet it's still something that you just don't hear. It's still kind of a taboo somehow.
So go out and hear it.
Yeah, vagina. What about you, Emily Duncan? Anything to add on that front?
No, I think we've covered it all.
All right, I think we both should say the word vagina again.
Vagina.
Awesome.